If I told you a United States president had a meeting with extraterrestrials, would you believe me? I wouldn't either, but after this video, you might change your mind. In 1944, Winston Churchill and Dwight D. Eisenhower allegedly made a wartime pact to conceal evidence of UFO encounters, a secret that would take on new significance a decade later. In 1954, President Eisenhower vanished during a Palm Springs vacation, with the White House claiming he needed emergency dental work. But military witnesses, declassified documents, and suspicious gaps in official logs give us a more extraordinary story. America's most decorated general and the 36th President of the United States was at the Edwards Air Force Base, allegedly negotiating humanity's interplanetary treaty. But we first need to discuss the relationship between Eisenhower and Churchill, because their relationship was forged during World War II, and it was marked by a deep mutual respect and continued well into the Cold War era after Eisenhower became the United States president in 1953. However, their partnership allegedly held a remarkable secret. In August of 1944, just months after D-Day, they reportedly had a clandestine discussion about a UFO incident involving a British reconnaissance plane encountering a metallic craft displaying unprecedented technological capabilities. According to a 1999 letter to the UK's defense minister from a grandson of an RAF bodyguard who witnessed their conversation, Churchill insisted on classifying the incident for at least 50 years, warning that public knowledge would create mass panic and destroys one's faith in the church, a decision Eisenhower supported. This approach to UFO secrecy would seemingly influence both leaders' later policies, with Churchill managing similar reports in the UK and Eisenhower allegedly continuing to deal with extraterrestrial matters throughout his presidency, suggesting their wartime pact of secrecy had far-reaching implications for both nations' approach to the UFO phenomenon. And then, in February of 1954, during what was officially recorded as a golfing vacation in Palm Springs, California, President Eisenhower allegedly participated in one of the most extraordinary events in presidential history. According to multiple accounts, Eisenhower secretly visited Edwards Air Force Base, located approximately 100 miles away or a mere 30-minute flight, to meet with extraterrestrials. According to the television show MUFON Hangar 1 that was released in 2014, they documented evidence suggesting that Edwards Air Force Base was completely closed to incoming air traffic and non-essential personnel for a 3-day period from February 19th to February 21st. This detail is significant as it potentially indicates a pre-arranged meeting between American officials and extraterrestrial visitors, coinciding with President Eisenhower's Palm Springs vacation. And according to the Daily Mail that was published in 2012, it stated that the beings that Eisenhower encountered, he described them as Nordic in appearance, tall, blonde, blue-eyed humanoids who communicated in English. The alleged discussions covered several critical points: concerns about Earth's nuclear weapons development, possible technological exchange programs, human spiritual development, and the establishment of a diplomatic relations. To explain the president's absence, a cover story was crafted claiming he had experienced a dental emergency which required immediate attention, though no documentation of this dental visit has ever been found. The incident is supported by various military witnesses, including base security personnel, Air Force officers, and support staff who later came forward. Documentation of the event remains elusive, with suspicious gaps in both Eisenhower's official schedule and base logs from the period, which we'll get into those 2 points a little bit later. The timing of this alleged encounter is particularly significant, occurring during the height of the Cold War when nuclear tensions were high and public interest in UFOs was peaking. Not only that, but before Eisenhower became the 36th President of the United States, running for 8 years, he was the General of the Army. And we can take a guess that he was aware of UFO sightings over the US airspace. But if you thought that that first encounter was weird, this one is much more bizarre, with a little bit more credible evidence. In February of 1955, President Eisenhower's public schedule indicated he would be hunting at Treasure's Plantation in Georgia, but according to newspaper reports, he ended up getting the sniffles. Then, Eisenhower disappeared for about 36 hours from the public eye, during which time he was reportedly at Holloman Air Force Base in New Mexico. Air Force medic Manuel Kirkland, who claims to have witnessed the event, described seeing an unidentified craft land next to the president's plane upon arrival, with the second UFO hovering protectively overhead. Eisenhower allegedly spent 45 minutes in the landed UFO before returning to Georgia, where journalists noticed that he looked a little fatigued after coming back from a hunting vacation. 9 years later, according to the book written by ufologist Jacques Vallée in 1964, another significant landing reportedly occurred at Holloman, providing more detailed descriptions of the beings, describing them as having gray complexions, pronounced noses, and wearing tight-fitting jumpsuits with thin headdresses believed to be communication devices. They carried translators and met with the Holloman base commander and other Air Force officers. Jacques Vallée expanded on these encounters, claiming that these hook-nosed greys had reached an agreement with the U.S. government allowing them to conduct human abductions and cattle mutilations in exchange for advanced technology. Vallée's sources describe these beings' unique biology. Their heart and lungs functioned as one organ, they had atrophied stomachs producing chlorophyll, and they both absorbed nutrition and excreted through their skin. Notably, nuclear testing was conducted in the area just days after Eisenhower's alleged 1955 visit, though the beings reportedly never provided the promised documentation of their human studies despite the agreement. After Eisenhower retired from presidency in 1961, he spent his later years part-time in Palm Springs, where he wrote his presidential memoirs. Notably absent from these writings was any mentions of extraterrestrial encounters, though this omission is understandable given the classified nature of such information if it existed. Perhaps more intriguing is the published version of his White House diary, which contained detailed daily records of his presidential activities. Yet curiously, during his 6-day vacation in February of 1954, the same period where he allegedly visited Edwards Air Force Base, the diary entries were either remarkably sparse or completely blank. And this absence of documentation is particularly suspicious since a vacationing president would typically have an ample leisure time to maintain detailed diary entries, suggesting these gaps might represent more than mere oversight. But this is all leading up to Robert Emenegger and Paul Shartley. Emenegger was a UCLA graduate who directed the 1974 documentary UFOs Past, Present, and Future, and his background was particularly relevant. His UCLA thesis had explored the influence of motion pictures on public behavior, with a focus on cinema and propaganda. And then he had worked for both the United States Information Agency and President Richard Nixon, who had personally praised him as a leader capable of recommending the best minds in America. In a surprising move, Emenegger received an unprecedented access to Department of Defense facilities for his documentary, which was actually funded by the DoD itself. A curious development given the government's official stance of disinterest in UFOs. And the project took an even more mysterious turn when Emenegger and his partner Paul Shartley were cryptically told to include footage about an actual contact that might occur in the future, or perhaps has already occurred at Holloman Air Force Base. Paul Shartley, the security manager and chief of the procurements for the Norton Air Force Base audio-visual program, claimed to have personally viewed footage of the contact shot around 1970, which he mentioned in an interview on UFO Cover-Up Live back in 1988. Take a listen.
I saw footage of 3 disc-shaped crafts. One of the craft landed and 2 of them went away.
Why did it land?
It appeared to be in trouble because it oscillated all the way down to the ground.
What did they look like?
Well, they were human-sized. They had odd gray complexion and a pronounced nose. They wore tight-fitting jumpsuits, thin headdresses that appeared to be communication devices, and in their hands, they held a translator.
Despite continuous assurance that Emmenegger and Strattle would receive the actual UFO landing footage, the promised material never materialized.
Well, although the Pentagon had been very, very cooperative all the way, at the last minute, the film was confiscated and we lost the whole finale of our show. But what I saw and heard was enough to convince me that, the phenomenon of UFOs is real, very real.
Instead, Emmenegger's documentary, UFOs Past, Present, and Future, was released in 1974 with animation and artistic renderings of the alleged aliens in place of the real footage. Nevertheless, the film broke new ground with its unprecedented level of Department of Defense cooperation, featuring NASA photographs, interviews with former Project Blue Book heads, and remarkably candid footage shot inside the Pentagon of Colonel Coleman discussing the extraterrestrial hypothesis. Now we're getting into a few other witnesses. In the book President Eisenhower's Close Encounters, Brigadier General Stephen L. Lovkin shared a remarkable account from his early military career that adds another layer to the Eisenhower UFO connection. According to Lovkin, who was a sergeant in the Army Signal Corps in 1959, he witnessed President Eisenhower casually sketching UFOs while waiting for a phone call at Camp David. The president, Lovkin recalled, was deeply interested in the UFO phenomenon, often discussing a 1952 incident that occurred before he took office and regularly reviewing classified military reports on the subject. Lovkin claimed Eisenhower was fully aware of the facts regarding alien visitation, but felt that his hands were tied in terms of public disclosure. Perhaps most notably, Lovkin suggested that Eisenhower ultimately lost control of the entire UFO situation to the military-industrial complex, which allegedly took charge of the physical evidence of its applications in classified corporate projects, particularly in airspace development. Then we have former New Hampshire State Representative Henry W. McElroy, who made headlines in 2010 when he publicly claimed to have read a classified 1953 government document while serving on the State Federal Relations and Veterans Affairs Committee. According to McElroy, this document detailed how a benevolent race of extraterrestrials had established radio contact with American military scientists and requested a private meeting with the nation's leaders. Take a listen to this one.
Hello, I'm speaking with you from Fort Monroe, Virginia. My name is Henry McElroy Jr., a retiring former state representative from New Hampshire. I would like to submit to our nation my personal testimony of one document related to one of these ongoing topics, which I saw while in office serving on the State Federal Relations and Veterans Affairs Committee. The document I saw was an official brief to President Eisenhower. To the best of my memory, this brief was pervaded with a sense of hope, and it informed President Eisenhower of the continued presence of extraterrestrial beings here in the United States of America. The brief seemed to indicate that a meeting between the President and some of these visitors could be arranged as appropriate if desired.
The briefing document, which was prepared by newly inaugurated President Eisenhower, allegedly expressed hope for establishing formal contact between humans and these extraterrestrial visitors. Now, while McElroy couldn't provide specific details about when or where the eventual meeting took place, he stated this.
Because of his optimism in his farewell address in 1961, I personally believe that Eisenhower did indeed meet with these extraterrestrial off-world astronauts.
He was neither seeking office nor public attention when he made these claims. What makes Elroy's testimony particularly intriguing is his credibility as a conservative politician with no apparent ulterior motive, suggesting he came forward simply because he felt that the public needed to know the truth. The narrative begins with this wartime discussion with Churchill and a UFO in 1944, extended through the report of Edwards Air Force Base meeting in 1954 and the Holloman Air Force Base encounter in 1955, and continues with decades of corroborated testimonies from credible witnesses. The development of the DoD in funding Emmenegger's 1974 documentary with upholding the promise of UFO footage suggests a carefully orchestrated balance between disclosure and secrecy. The testimonies of figures like Brigadier General Lovekin, Congressman McElroy, and the various military personnel who came forward decades later add layers of credibility to this account. Yet we're left with these profound questions. If these encounters did occur, what agreements were made? Why would the government maintain such secrecy while simultaneously allowing hints and clues to emerge through military-supported documentaries and carefully leaked information? Perhaps most importantly, what does this pattern of selective disclosure tell us about our readiness, both then and now, to confront the possibility of extraterrestrial contact? The evidence suggests that something extraordinary did occur during Eisenhower's presidency. But like many pivotal moments in history, the full truth may be more complex than what we could ever imagine, carefully buried beneath layers of official secrecy and unofficial revelations. If you enjoyed the show, hit that like button right down below and let me know in the comments. Do you believe this encounter or not? Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, as I do several shows right here every single week. That is it for today. I will see you next time. Be safe, and remember, keep your eyes on the skies. If you enjoy the strange and the mysterious, UFOs, the paranormal, and cryptids, this channel is for you. So make sure to subscribe, as I do 3 videos right here every single week, and hit that notification bell so you do not miss any of the bonus content I post right here.